To calling in the love you need. Um, this is day 7. I wanted to go over what we've learned so far. I just wanted to go through a review because I've gotten some notes about people being confused and not knowing how to kind of sort out the information that I've given. So I just wanted to pause and collectively take a breath and just go back over. These are the things we've learned, and this is all we're supposed to know at this point. And we'll get to other things tomorrow. But for now, I just want to say that I want to tell you what the most important things to focus on are. And those are the things that we've studied so far. So we studied the nature of the seventh house. That was our first day. The nature of the seventh house is that it is the place in our chart that tells us about the kinds of committed partnerships we're going to have. That commitment can be whatever we want it to be, but it's an agreement of sorts. That can be a business agreement, that can be a romantic partnership, and the seventh house is also traditionally known as the house of open enemies, the enemies that you can see and know about. It is the place of opposition, it is the place of the other. It is a place where we meet a person or people that pull something out of us, that make us stand up and figure out what we're made out of and what we love and what we hate and all of the things in between. It is the nature of being in relationship. It's that opposition to the first house, which is the only house of self. And so we went through the first day. If your first house is Leo, your seventh house is going to be Aquarius. And this is what that relationship needs. And so if you're confused about that, about your seventh house, about the sign that is in your seventh house or that is your seventh house, please go back and review that first day so that you can get a really good understanding of the sign that is in the first house. Then we went through the planet that rules the sign that is in your seventh house, that is your seventh house. So we call it the ruler of your seventh house. And that ruler is one of 7 traditional planets in a traditional framework. So it's either the sun, if you have Leo in the 7th, the moon, if you have Cancer in the 7th, Mercury, if you have Virgo or Gemini in the 7th, Venus, if you have Libra or Taurus in the 7th, Mars, if you have Aries or Scorpio in the 7th, Jupiter, if you have Sagittarius or Pisces as the 7th house, or Saturn, if you have Capricorn or Aquarius. So those are the rulers. And what is a ruler? Well, a ruler is the planet that is in charge of a domain of our life in astrology. That planet, this planet, the planet that rules your 7th house, is in charge of the kinds of relationships, the kinds of people, the kinds of relationship issues, the kinds of relationship gifts, the kinds of relationship challenges that you will come up against. So again, the planet that rules the sign that is in your 7th house is in charge of that domain of your life. And so the quality, the nature of the planet is going to tell us something. So it's just knowing, say, if the sun rules your 7th house, it's about your personality, your soul's purpose. If it's the moon, it's going to be about connecting and comfort and needing that comfort connection, emotional, cathartic connection, possibly. If it's Venus, it's going to be about love. It's going to be about beauty. It's going to be about connecting. If it's Mars, it's going to be something that is feisty or fierce or challenging, or about something about independence, which is, one of those things. Okay, well, how do we do relationship and independence? But that's the paradox. That's what makes us interesting. If it's Jupiter, it's going to be about learning and growing and studying and teaching and traveling. If it's Saturn, it's going to be about discipline and order and structure and knowing the rules and knowing the commitment. And so those topics, like whatever ruler you have, whatever planet rules your 7th house, say your Venus rules your 7th house and Venus rules my 7th house, it is going to show up for us in different ways. But we both know that the nature of Venus is going to be ruling that place of our chart. And so the nature of Venus is to, again, create connection, to create love, to create harmony, to create beauty, to be nice. So they're just themes. Um, and then we looked at where the ruler of the seventh house was. And so having the ruler of your seventh house in your second house has something to do with money and finances and self esteem and building one's life. The ruler of the seventh house in the 10th house has something to do with career and social status and possibly building a business together. Same, there's similar vibrations with the ruler in this of the seventh and the second or the 10th or the sixth. Those all are work houses. Um, the ruler of the seventh and the seventh is going to be really clear. It rules that place. It is that place. It is very clean in a sense. The ruler of the seventh and the fifth house is going to be something about children, possibly, or sex and sexuality, possibly, or creativity, creative, artistic projects. And be about passion and pleasure and fun and play. So we talked about that on day 3. And then on day 4 and day 5, I gave you homework. We have the weekends off. I don't send out classes on the weekends. So then I gave you homework about taking yourself on a date to go understand the nature of the sign in your 7th house, and then the planet that rules that, and maybe the house that planet's in. And then we added yesterday, which I think threw some people for a loop. I wanted to tell you about one of the conditions of the ruler of your 7th house, because it's an important piece of this way of working with traditional astrology. If the ruler of your 7th house is in its own sign, it's got strength, it's got its own power. If it's in the sign of its exaltation, there might be something famous about it, or something that is that you or the person is well known for. There's something that is really, it's strong. Exaltations are powerful. They attract attention. If the planet is in its detriment, that planet will feel like it has to work really hard. It'll have to overcome a hurdle. If it's in its fall, it might feel depressed, or like it doesn't, like, again, Venus in Virgo will feel like they can't often, like, say Venus rules your 7th house and Venus is in Virgo. That Venus will often feel like, well, I'll get to the relationship once I get the work done. I'll get to the ball once I've cleaned the house. I'm not perfect yet. Venus is about love and connection, but Virgo's about working and getting things perfect. So it's a tough combination. That kind of combination needs to know that nothing's ever perfect, and the time is now to enjoy oneself, and also having a relationship that helps that person get organized and feel like a good sense of work is getting done. And then they also might be attracted to people that worry a lot, or that are a little, nerdy, or like super geeky, or like really into studying and learning things. And then we went through a variation. I did it quickly, but we went through, like, okay, well, if Venus is in Capricorn, this, and if Venus is in Aquarius, this. I went through those quickly. So we have the 7th house. We have the sign that's in the 7th house. We have the planet that rules the sign of our 7th house. And then we look at, okay, well, where is that planet? Oh, it's in this house. So my relationship is connected to this area of life. And then what sign is that planet in? Oh, well, it's in a different sign. It's in this other sign. How does that sign work for that planet? Oh, it works really well. Great. Oh, it doesn't work well at all. Okay, the red flag. Now I know something's up. And so that's all we've done so far. Nothing else in the chart have we looked at. Nothing else have we touched. Just those principles. And I really want you to get a firm understanding of that stuff. So I don't want people to worry about anything in this course. I want you to know that if the ruler of your 7th house is in say it's Jupiter in Aquarius, that's not strange. Jupiter is not strange in Aquarius. Some people might disagree with me. And it's not strange in Scorpio. Those are just signs that it doesn't rule, and it's not in its exaltation or fall or detriment or in its own home sign. So it's just information. Then we just look at the nature of the sign and say, oh, okay, well, that sign is like this, or it has these qualities. So don't worry. Don't worry if your ruler's in a different sign than what it's supposed to be in. I'd like everyone to think about how the ruler of your seventh house might function in the sign that it's in, right? So there's the planet itself that rules your seventh house, and then it's in another sign for a lot of you. So how do those two things go together? How do they work? And not, I don't want you to know like how it works in astrology. I want you to think about how it works for you. How does this work for you? How does this show up in your life? And I know that those things are hard. It's hard to come to those conclusions on our own. It's easier to have an astrologer tell us. Um, but it's important for you to do a little research on the planet itself and then the sign that it's in and the house that it's in, which is what I asked you to do yesterday, is to look up um, Google skyscript.co.uk or .uk.co, and then the planet, and then in a separate search, the sign, and then in a separate search, the house. But also, Cafe Astrology is a much simpler. The Skyscript is a traditional site. It's a really deep and it's really complex and it's very academic. If you want a less academic version, just really like cut to the chase, go to Cafe Astrology, and I'll put that in the email with this call. So please also read the emails that I send out, because I answer a lot of questions in the emails. I try to talk about the things that people are asking me. So try to give those a good scan if you've got a question. Okay, so if you have both a sign that is your seventh house and you have the sign that the ruler of your seventh house is in. Sometimes they are the same, many times they're different. Okay, sorry. You have both a sign that your seventh house, right? So say your seventh house is Gemini, and then you've got Mercury, the planet that rules Gemini, in Pisces. And so there's the sign of your seventh house, and then there's the sign, for most of you, of the ruler of your seventh house. And so we have to stretch ourselves and take both of those signs into consideration. Okay, right? It's like a deeper kind of, okay, this is another layer of it, because astrology is deep and there are layers of information. And so that's where we can get confused, but try to just get very simple about it. Just try to pick out a couple key phrases from the planet that rules your seventh, from the sign that the planet is in that rules your seventh, and also the seventh house and the sign that is in the seventh house. Just a couple key phrases to try to make a sentence. Like the ruler, my relationships are, they love, I love to know the container and the rules and the boundaries and the commitment of my relationship, because Saturn is the ruler of my seventh. Saturn is in Libra. It's exalted, so it does really well, and it loves peace and balance and beauty. Um, and so that's really helpful um, to the situation, right? So I might like somebody who's a little bit more traditional, even, or somebody who's really likable and lovable and really sweet and nice. And that Saturn is in my third house. And so that I also need a lot of communication. I need to be with somebody who understands that I need to have a good communication, although it's Saturn ruled, and Saturn can be a little cooler or a little bit more conservative or a little bit more withholding. And so I want a balanced kind of communication. And I'm going to go through some chart examples to help solidify this information. Okay. And then my last thing is just please get clear on the planet that rules your seventh house. Again, I think I just said this. Just get clear on the planet that rules your seventh, the sign it's in, and then the house it lives in. Without that information, you'll be lost and nothing else that we add on will make sense. So we've got to pause and get really clear on those things. Don't try to don't try to date people just because they're the sign of your seventh house or its ruler. It may naturally happen. For a lot of you, it does. But all of us have really complex charts. And then the people that we date all have really complex charts. And there are many nuances to how charts work together. So yes, that's a great idea. Like that's a really simple simple way to see things. And sometimes it will happen like that for you. It'll be like seamless and beautiful. But for many of us, it won't. It'll be, again, more nuanced because the thing is that somebody, you could have a Pisces seventh house and somebody is an Aries, but they have Venus in Pisces, and you won't know that until you see their chart, right? And so, and also there's much more complex rules about how you put charts together. So that's a whole other kind of field of astrology. Um, for the purposes of our work together, I just want you to think again about the nature of the of that sign, and how that translates into what you want in the nature of the person, people you date or partner with. And just to reiterate, I will not be sending emails on weekends. You'll have homework to do for the weekend, but no emails for me. That's why there were no emails for day 4 or day 5. Sorry for any confusion, but please note if there's like 2 days missing, it's just because that was a weekend and there's no emails on the weekends, just the homework. So please read again the emails that I send with the recordings. Okay, it is not good or bad if you have or you do not have planets in your seventh house. I'm going to say that again. I've said it before, but I'm going to say it again. It is not good or bad if you have planets in the seventh house or if you do not have planets in the seventh house. Many people won't have planets in the seventh house. Some people will. And we will cover that soon, but we have not covered it yet. So please refrain from asking questions about that because we haven't gotten there. And I just want to pause again and make sure we've got this stuff concrete. Okay. What we have not covered, planets in your seventh house. We haven't covered that yet. We have not covered planets on the descendant, and we will not cover planets on the ascendant because we're not doing the first house in this, except for the initial information that I gave you. But please use Google. Like, Google's an amazing thing. If you have Chiron on the ascendant, Google Chiron on the ascendant astrology. What does it mean? And there'll be a million articles that'll come up. Some will be not so good. Some will be amazing. You'll resonate with some of it. You won't resonate with other parts of it. But Google. It's amazing. And we have not covered other planets in your chart, and we won't unless they relate to the actual material that we're working with here. Okay, so let's do a couple of sample charts. Look at this. We have Tina Turner's chart. Now, I just want to say I love Tina Turner. She's obviously Tina Turner. The charts I have, uh, some of them are like charts that astrologers always use, and there's a reason for that. It's really hard to get people's birth data correctly. Not a lot of public figures have the correct birth data out in the world because they don't want astrologers talking and throwing shade at them. No, but they don't, they're private and whatever. Maybe they don't know. And also, I was looking for people that had very well-known relationship situations. So I was looking for famous people because famous people live out big archetypes. They are kind of, they live a larger than life. And so it's easy to see the archetypes land. I had to get celebrities or famous people, well-known people with correct birth times. And so anyways, the collection of people that I have, I wouldn't normally pick all the time, but I was going for those two things. Okay, so we can see Tina Turner has Aquarius in the seventh house. Aquarius is her seventh house. You could say either of those things, right? So some people were a little confused about this. These are the signs. That's Capricorn, that's Aquarius, that's Pisces, that's Aries, that's Taurus, that's Gemini, that's Cancer, that's Leo, that's Virgo, that's Libra, that's Scorpio, that's Sagittarius, that's Capricorn, and we're back to Aquarius. So Aquarius is Tina Turner's seventh house. So what's the seventh house? Seventh house is the house of intimate partnerships. What's Aquarius? Well, Aquarius is an innovative air sign, innovative communications, a way to get the message out. Someone who is possibly really intelligent or really, we might be attracted to someone with really great ideas. What planet rules Aquarius? Saturn. Where's Saturn? Well, here is Saturn. Saturn is sitting where? Saturn is in the ninth house because this little number 9 tells us so. What sign is Saturn in? Well, Saturn's in Aries. Okay. Now, if we went back to our little cheat sheet that I gave you yesterday, you'd see that Saturn is in its fall in Aries. So we've got two clues here. Saturn is a malefic planet. It can be a very difficult planet. It's a very important aspect of life to work with, but it's not easy all the time. Saturn, the nature of Saturn can be cold or withholding or cruel even or rejecting. And Aries is a sign that is known for its enthusiasm and excitement and also its energy, but it's a fire sign, so it can be very hot and it can erupt. It is a sign that's ruled by Mars, right? It's a Mars ruled sign. So it can be violent. It can be intense. It can and all of us have Aries in our chart, right? So we are all have that capacity. Astrology talks about human nature. So if we have Saturn in its fall, if we have a malefic planet in a sign where it has a really hard time, there's a red flag here. There is a little bit of worry here. Okay, if this person was my client and they came to me and said, what's the deal with my relationships? I'd be like, oh, well, have you dealt with cruelty or violence in your relationships? Now, I'm cheating because we all know Tina Turner was married to Ike Turner, and he was horribly violent to her. Now, he was also a Saturnian figure to her, even though she supplied a tremendous amount of the talent and the energy and the vitality and she's Tina Turner. He was, and I don't know an extensive amount, I mean, I've seen the movie, I've read some of the stuff, but he was like an authority figure with her, right? And so we're talking about the nature of Saturn. Saturn is the authority. Saturn is sometimes the father. Saturn is sometimes the patriarch. Saturn is the patriarch or patriarchy. Saturn is that the root, she, it is the lord of karma and the lord of time. And so it's about constrictions and restrictions. And so if I see Saturn ruling the seventh house in a sign that is really hard for Saturn, I might say, well, do you go with really controlling people, or has that been part of your relationship history? Because I also know that we don't stay the same. I've given readings to people that have suffered, atrocities that are, it's amazing that they can walk around and live a great life, but they walk around and live great lives. Those people too. That atrocity will most 99.9% of the time show up in their chart. And so just because I see something that's hard in a chart, painful in a chart, I know that it doesn't mean that that's the end of the story. I know that people are resilient. I know that people are amazing. So let's talk about this. Saturn is in the ninth house. What is the ninth house? The ninth house is a place of travel, of going to us, foreign places. It's a place of other cultures. It's a place of learning. It's a place of religion. It's a place of philosophy. It's a place of spiritual experience. Now, Saturn is a planet that can sometimes isolate us. So that's another question I might have for the person. Are your relationships isolating in any way? And again, because it's in Aries, the nature of it could be hot or tempered, and that their partner could have a really bad temper. These are just just basic things about the planet and the sign. It's amazing how profoundly deep it can be with really simple rules. But the nature of the ninth house is to move us out into the world. So when I see that, I might say, oh, well, do you go out with people that are from a different culture than you? Now, Ike Turner, I don't know where he was born, but I think that what this explains in terms of their relationship is that I think he got her, and not to say that she couldn't have done this herself and, all of the nuances, but I think he brought her, or was the way for her to get out of her little town. And I think that I know that they traveled huge distances physically together, right? Like they moved around to realms of the world that she had not been in before him. And so in a way we could say, I think that if I'm wrong, please forgive me, but that's my assumption from what I know. So we could say that in a way, oh, well, your husband or your partner or your boo or your bae or your or your date or your people need to move you out into a different realm of life in the world. Do you travel together? Do you study together? Do you teach together? Do you do you have a spiritual practice together? Now, of course, the relationship led Tina Turner into her own Buddhist spiritual practice, right? That's what helped her recover from the trauma of the abuse and losing her career and all of that. And so we know that there's a spirituality here that's also linked in. The other piece that we know about her life is that at 72, she married the love, apparently the love of her life. Then they live in Switzerland together, and she left America behind. She was like, peace, I'm out. Like, I don't need that. My home for 20 years has been in Switzerland. And she, is with the man that she loves, the person that she loves, and they got married and she seems really happy. So I want you to see this for people, because a lot of you Saturn ruled seventh houses have written to me or written on the Dropbox. And that's because Saturn is, it makes us do work. And what does Saturn do? Well, it makes us mature. It forces us to deal with ourselves and to deal with life as it is. It's a really harsh reality check. But when we do that check, when we are like, okay, check, check, I will do my work, I'll double check it, I'll turn it in on time, I will get a head start on the rest of it, I will show up for my life, I will be stripped down to nothing and be able to, really be authentic and have my integrity, right? All she wanted was her name when she left. So she kept, and she was willing to let go of everything. It's a very ninth house kind of situation. The other thing about the ninth house is it's about legal matters and legal battles. So we could say, well, was there a significant, because Saturn's in a not great sign, we could say, is there a significant legal battle here that you might have come up against? Oh, yes, in fact. She gave up her everything. She just took her name, which is amazing. So, and of course, we did this in this course. She's a Leo rising. Her whole deal is to self-express. And then she's got Saturn in the seventh house. So she needs somebody who can help her, give her the stability she needs so that she can do that Leo thing. And so her second marriage brings her to a country that was previously, not her homeland. And she lives with somebody who's not from her home culture, from her original home culture. So it's a great example of that, and of it turning out well for her, because she did the Saturnian thing. She sat and meditated and chanted and found her way spiritually, right? And so this is another thing that we can keep turning this and looking at it. This relationship needs a spiritual connection. For this chart, needs a spiritual awakening, possibly, or a spiritual experience. And that has to be through discipline. You see, it's Saturn, it's discipline, it's structure, it's order. Buddhism is an immensely ordered and structured practice. Most religions, when you get into them, really are. They're about structure and order and the discipline of it. And Buddhism, so much so because of the actual meditation that we must do in order to be in the practice. So I hope that's a good, clear example. Let's go to the next one. Johnny Cash. Okay. Johnny Cash, famous country singer, just heartbreakingly beautiful music, but total, complete alcoholic and drug addict, and person who just was self-destructive for a long time, until he met, well, even for a long time after he met her, but June, who became June Carter Cash, right? Again, forgive me if I'm getting that wrong, but he met her. I mean, he had heard her when he was a little boy. He heard her voice and he always wanted to meet her, and he was like in love with her from the first moment he heard her voice. So listen, right? It's the voice. He heard her voice on the radio and he was like, oh, there was something that lit up in him, apparently. Again, I don't know these people personally, so, but hopefully the stories are true. And what did they do together? Well, they sang. They ended up, they were on the road together. He was in love with her. She was married. They couldn't be together. And for like 10 years, I think, they were in this tumultuous, like, he just kept asking her to marry him. Marry me, marry me, marry me, marry me, marry me. And she kept saying, no, not until you get your act together. And so he had to go through this huge catharsis around getting sober, and working out his stuff. And then they were together forever. And he just loved every, you know, pebble she walked on. So let's look at the nature of what's happening here. The seventh house is Virgo. What is Virgo? Virgo is discerning. Virgo is specific. Virgo has got it together. Virgo is put together perfectly. Virgo is working hard. Virgo is on it. Who rules Virgo? Mercury, right? Okay, great. So we know something about the relationship, maybe about communication. They sang together, literally. So there's that piece of it. Johnny has this, first house in Pisces, with obviously a lot of planets here. So who's Pisces? Well, Pisces is the poet, the dreamer, the one who wants the whole feeling, the one who wants to bliss out, the one who wants to get drunk, get high, get checked out, get spiritual. He became very religious, right? Spiritual in his after he got sober. And so he needs somebody who's going to have their ish together, like have themselves in order and in line. And that's what she was, right? She had her own stuff, but she was disciplined since she was very young, and she was very you know seemingly, from what I can tell, very perfectly put together, and maybe portrayed that perfect image. And then when her marriage broke up and she was with him, it threw all of that for a loop. But she was under a microscope in the music scene, in the country music scene, and she had to maintain a certain type of perfect kind of image, and her perfect kind of family, and all of that pressure that she was under. So there's that Virgoan quality that he's attracted to, somebody who's got everything ordered and disciplined and structured and in line. Sorry, I keep saying structure, which is more Saturnian, but Virgo loves systems, right? And the way things work and having organization. But the ruler of this person, Johnny Cash's seventh house, is Mercury. And again, Mercury, if you go back to that chart, is here in its detriment. So again, we have a planet that is in a sign that is not good, not easy, not helpful. The sign itself, Pisces, is dreamy and poetic, musical. Pisces is very artistic, right? Pisces is the artist. Pisces and Libra kind of share that in a sense. But Pisces is much, it's fluid. But we can say, well, there's something here that's going to be really hard for the person. And also, where is the Mercury? Well, the Mercury is in the first house in this house system. It's in the first house. And so this person needs a mate, a partner, to help them get their act together, to help them realize themselves. Why? Because the ruler of the seventh is in the first house of self. And so June came along, and finally, like, she resisted him and resisted him and resisted him, maybe critically so, like, you can't walk no line, that line from the movie Walk the Line, the story about the two of them. He's just falling over drunk, in love with her, and literally drunk and high. So the ruler being in Pisces denotes some sort of issue, but also, again, when the first house says this person has to help you find your way. And what did they do? Well, they sang together. They eventually built a life together. Apparently they were happy as clams until the very end. And he, wanted nothing more but then to be with her, and she him. And so it took a lot, right? This is a planet that rules the seventh in its detriment, in a really hard sign, in its fall, in a hard sign for it. There's so much. Pisces gets really overwhelmed. Pisces gets really intoxicated. Pisces really loses the plot sometimes. And Virgo's sitting, across it, tapping its foot, going, when are you going to get it together? And so I'm doing a couple of things here. I'm talking about Virgo as Johnny Cash's partner, and then I'm talking about Mercury in a hard situation, talking about his difficulty in relationship. Now, also, we could talk about June having she had a really difficult marriage, I think, before Johnny Cash. And so this talks about the nature of the person he's attracted to. And of course, he had a lot of lovers and a lot of women, I think, that came through his life before. And so Pisces is a very fertile sign, and Pisces has a lot. And so this can be having a tremendous amount of relationships. And of course, he had an original partnership, original marriage that he walked away from and destroyed ultimately. I think was how that is kind of portrayed by him and his ex, because of his addictions and because of his being away and because of his not being able to deal with his own stuff. So, but in the end, it works out kind of like this fairy tale love story, very Piscean, right? So we're merging and we're blending all this stuff. And of course, him and his wife spoke to the world. They sang to the world. They gave us a lot of information. And he, and her told stories together. That was their thing. Okay. So Tiger Woods. um, The seventh house is Pisces, right? The sign in the seventh house is Pisces. The ruler of Pisces is Jupiter. Jupiter here is in Aries, so it's neither good nor bad in Aries. It's neutral, really. It's in a fire sign. It does a little better in that, so it's good. It's sitting in the eighth. Jupiter is the planet of a lot, right? It's plenty, it's big, it wants to bring benefit, it wants to bring goodness, it wants to bring all of this, again, exaggeration or bigness. So Jupiter is in the eighth house. And if you remember, the eighth house is about shared resources. It's about combining our money and how we might do that. It's also the house of death and about mental anguish. And so, while I don't know a tremendous amount about Tiger Woods' first wife, I do know that it didn't end well, and that was because of his affairs and him lie and his what seems to be like a sex addiction. Um, and so, when I see a planet in the eighth house, it can be about making a lot of money together, but it is an eighth house situation. The eighth house, again, does deal with death and things going in a kind of life threatening direction. That can be a part of it. Can be. Doesn't have to be, but can be. And so when I see that, it's also, again, shared resources, and Jupiter increases things. So there might be an issue here with the person's marriage and the person's shared income, and the nature of it being a big situation or a lot of money or a big kind of settlement, right? Now, again, it could also be that this person married somebody that had a great inheritance. That could be another way to look at this. There's other things in the chart that tell us that that's not so, but just looking at Jupiter in the eighth house could be that. It could be that again, grow a really great business together. But because we know how this relationship went down, and we know about the other relationships, some of them that he had, and the issues that he's dealing with. Again, Virgo, his ascendant is his first house, so that's again really ordered and critiquing and needing to be really on it all the time. Virgo is always working super critical, super organized, super detailed. And so we can see his ability to work really hard for a long time paid off in a certain way. The seventh house being in Pisces, we might need somebody romantic. We might need somebody who helps us relax. We might need somebody who is open and fertile and is inclusionary, that brings us in or brings us a sense of peace. And again, Pisces is also that sign that wants to get drunk or high or like lose itself in something else. That can be a part of Pisces. And so there can be possibly something around addictions. And I wouldn't always put that with Pisces, but sometimes. And then seeing Jupiter's in the eighth, it can be a sign that something might go wrong. That if it's associated with death, if it's associated with an ending, then it's a tricky situation. So always want to ask questions about that, but always very, if I'm in a reading, I'm very careful with it. But um, I'm sure that the settlement between him and his ex was very difficult, and I'm sure he ended up parting with a lot of money. Again, it's a big situation, and it's something that, the eighth house is also like a hidden place. We don't really see what goes on there. And it's a place where we might harm or get harmed. And so obviously I would think his wife feels harmed by the situation, and possibly we could say that there was some sort of self-harm going on there, again, from something else in his chart, but that his hidden relationships or hidden ways of being might have been harmful. Eighth house-ish, we would say. And then maybe his wife and his partnership was able to also help him generate a lot of money, that their union together helped him succeed for a while. Okay, so President Obama. I wanted to give you an example of the ruler. The seventh house is Leo. The ruler of the seventh house is the sun. The sun is in Leo. It's in the seventh house. So it's a very like, okay, seventh house, sun, da 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 da. It's here. It's all here. The sun is super strong in Leo. It's the only sign the sun rules is Leo. So would you say that President Obama's identity is both connected to the person he's married to, and that the person that he's married to has been quite beneficial for him, and that a big part of his life and his identity is being in that partnership? And you could say that, and I said this in my last course, which some of you might have been in, but you could say that that might be true for a lot of people, but for a lot of presidents, but not all of them seem so in alignment with their partner as he does. He seems to be really, dramatically, flamboyantly at times in love and dedicated to Michelle, which is a beautiful thing to see. And so, it's in that Leo kind of way. It's dramatic. It's got a flair. He might sing her a song or read her a poem on the air or do those things. It's romantic. But it's also about his self-expression, that something about being in relationship is really important for his own ability to self-express. So I would say that he really needs her. And then the seventh house is also the house of open enemies. So have many, I know presidents always have a lot of open enemies, but Obama has had a tremendous amount of ridiculous, racist, horrible, xenophobic, uh, Islamophobic, even things thrown at him. And so more so than any other president that I can think of. And so his opposition has been quite obvious, right? That's been from the get-go, the things that he must have to, and he does publicly, but also maybe even privately suffer through and deal with, is pretty extraordinary. So we can see that there's something also about his nature of this is part of his life's unfolding, is to shine a light on that. We got to see, for those who want to see it, how, racism functions under a system of white supremacy, even if you're the president. And so that's that open enemy kind of feel, and it's in Leo, so it's expressive, right? It's not hidden. It's not Scorpio. We're not. This is not something underneath the earth or undercover in any way. This is right out there. It's a Leo kind of feeling, and then also that he shines in his relationship. It's important. Okay, so I hope that those examples were helpful. Um, I hope that the review is also helpful. And I will, be back tomorrow with another installment. So take good care, lots of love, and bye for now.